Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and this is a review of the WonderMaker ZR 3D printer. It is a multicolor capable 3D printer that is larger than most, and this is going to be a fairly interesting review, I think, because the take that I'm going to have about this printer, I think, differs from the vast majority of comments that I have read online, on social media, in Discord, and just about anywhere that someone who has had experience with this printer has written about. All right, so if you are interested in any of the previous videos that I did with this printer, including the live stream that I did with the first few prints to a follow-up video when I ran some calibration tests and whatnot to just see how they would turn out, I will leave those linked down in the description. All right, so let's just sort of briefly go over the history of this printer here. This printer is from WonderMaker, which is a new company. And as a new company, WonderMaker took to Kickstarter in order to crowdfund not only this printer, but a couple other printers as well. Besides the regular ZR, they also were successfully funded for the tool-changing version of this, which is called the ZR Ultra, and the tool-changing and enclosed version of this that is called the ZR Ultra S. And this company utilized Kickstarter in a way that I feel that Kickstarter should be used, from young, new upstart companies that want to get a product off the ground and just need the help of the public in order to fund their ambitions, as opposed to larger companies that use Kickstarter as basically a storefront. So if you wanted to support a company that just sort of went about crowdfunding in the right way, then WonderMaker is one of the companies that has managed to pull that off. And in the time that they have done this, this printer, the WonderMaker ZR, has become available to purchase, not just for people who backed it, but also anyone else who just happens to be out there and wanted to pick up this printer as well. And when it first launched, the price was around $700, which is actually quite high. But as of right now, we are at the end of December. Here are the current prices. Two places where you can get this from. The first one is going to be SainsMart, which is an online store that sells a variety of different 3D printing products, not just stuff from WonderMaker. And you can get it from SainsMart for $524. If you want to go the Amazon route, you can also pick this up from Amazon. It's going to be more expensive at $569. And if you want the enclosed version of this, because they do also sell an enclosure for this, you can also get that from Amazon, and that's going to cost $599. So specs wise, this printer is very similar to many other modern consumer-based high-speed 3D printers out there. It has a Core XY design, but the build volume is larger than most that aren't printers that have the words plus or max in their name. You're going to have a 300 by 300 by 300 millimeter build volume, which is pretty large, and it's pretty awesome to have. For the acceleration, it's going to be your normal 20,000 millimeters per second squared, those type of things that we are just totally used to at this point. But another thing that makes this printer somewhat different from the closest looking printer that it resembles, which is something like the FlashForge 85X, is that this printer is open source. It runs Clipper, but it is not a version of Clipper that has been co-opted by WonderMaker and basically locked down so that you can't really do anything with it. They've left it open for you to go in and change different values and parameters and anything that you feel that you might need to do. And you can do all of that without having to access any cloud server, for example. Simply typing in the IP address for this printer into your own home network will allow you to bring up the fluid interface where you'll be able to see what the printer is doing. You'll be able to control the printer, and you'll be able to tinker with things to your heart's content if that's something that you want to do. But if you wanted to engage with any type of cloud things, they do have a mobile app as well that you can download and you can make an account for if you wanted to have access to that app and then do things from the app in order to control the printer itself. You can do that as well. Some other features on this printer, as far as hardware goes, there is an auxiliary fan that is right there on the far right-hand side from where I'm sitting, which is something that may or may not be included with the regular models that are being shipped out. I do believe at one point the auxiliary fan was considered an add-on, but this one came to me shipped directly from Amazon. It also has an integrated light that is already there, that's already built in, so you don't have to worry about adding that. And then there's also a place for a camera add-on in the front. That was also something that if you back this printer, you were able to get. But if you didn't, you're able to purchase the add-on separately, and then you'll be able to monitor things directly from the camera feed, which will also integrate into Clipper. Now, if you choose to get this printer, when it comes to setting it up, it is pretty straightforward, and they have an instruction guide that walks you through the steps, and it's pretty easy to follow. It's not completely assembled, but the hard part is already done for you. What you'll have to do really is just assemble, for example, the filament separator that's here on the back. When I say assemble, I just mean just bolt it down into place. You don't have to actually like connect it to put it together in and of itself. The same thing goes for the filament module, which is also labeled here on this side. The screen is something that you can pop on fairly easily, and then you have to connect these PTFE tubes to the filament separator and to the filament module, and then run this all the way into the print head. You have to plug in the print head, and the instructions actually quite good, and I was very happy with how they put everything together. It's very clear, it's concise. I don't think you'll have any trouble figuring out how to get this printer set up right out of the box. Now, since this is an open frame 3D printer, you see it's not enclosed anywhere. And that means that when it comes to printing, you're mostly going to be restricted to PLA, PETG, and TPU filaments and different variants of those particular filaments. And that's because since it's not enclosed, you'll have a harder time trying to print with materials that require or will at least benefit greatly from having a heated chamber, such as ABS and ASA and things like that. So if you wanted to print with TPU, however, WonderMaker does recommend that you don't use the filament module to print with the TPU. Then instead, you just run it directly into the print head. That was something that they said during a recent live stream. And when you want to get spare parts, the spare parts were not available at first, but now if you go over to SainSmart's website, you'll see that there are some replacement parts, not a whole lot, but there are some things that you can buy from SainSmart to go with this printer, such as nozzles, for example, so that if you wanted a larger diameter nozzle or a smaller nozzle, you'll be able to get it directly from there as well. You should also know that if you do get the ZR, you are not going to be able to upgrade it to the ZR Ultra because they're just a little bit too different. So there's no upgrade path for that. So here's the thing about this printer that I think makes my particular video different than a lot of other opinions that are going to be out there, and maybe even some other videos that you may or may not have seen yet. I do want to stress that it's very important after you watch this to also go check out other people's videos about this printer to see their experiences, because this has been a very unusual experience for me. The general consensus around the WonderMaker ZR 3D printer is that it is not a very good printer mechanically, that suffers from hardware and software bugs that will just make the whole printing experience very tedious to do because you're always going to be trying to find something that you need to do in order to fix it. There's something going on with the quality control that I cannot quite explain, whether it has to do with different parts that are of different quality, perhaps, that are put into different printers at random, and maybe you'll get a good one, maybe you'll get a bad one. Most of what I have read and seen have been bad. But my experience with this printer has been the complete opposite. This has been one of the most reliable and one of the best 3D printers that I've had the pleasure of using. I've never had a clogged nozzle. I have never had an issue that I had to dig deeply into either support material or contacting the team itself in order to figure out how do I get this right. I have not had a problems with prints that are layer shifting. I have not had massive problems with it. And the prints that I'm going to show you will show you that this printer, if you happen to get lucky and get a really good one, or hopefully if they tighten things up and this can be the norm, it'll be very indicative of what you can expect to get with this printer if you buy it, should you choose to buy it. All right. So here's how everything just basically worked out for me. So one of the great things that I enjoyed about this printer is just how easy it was for me to move my files from my computer to this printer. Now, I know that that doesn't seem like a big deal, but recently I got my hands on the SnapMaker U1. It's one of the most popular 3D printers out right now, and it is a very good printer. But one of the things that I dislike about it right now the most is the slicing software, in that it has a difficult time connecting to the printer. And even after it successfully connects to the printer, after a while, it'll just kind of forget that it's connected. And I have to go through these weird steps like opening up the mobile app and looking at the camera and just trying to do something that's going to wake the printer up so that I can send a file from the slicer to the printer. But with this, I have never had that problem. Now, I am just using the regular Orca slicer with this printer. WonderMaker does have its own slicing software. It's called like WonderMaker Orca or some variation of that. I have not used it. I did not download it. There is a ready-made profile in the latest version of Orca Slicer that has the WonderMaker ZR already there. So you can just use that one. And then everything is going to be fine. You connect it to your network. When you go to Orca Slicer, you connect this to Orca Slicer and it just knows that it's there. You can just send your files over and everything is fine. So I really do like that ease of it. The most frequent problem that I've had with this printer, I've encountered this weird error where the UI on the screen will tell me that the model has no color, even though in the slicer, it is clearly a color of some type. So I'm like, well, what do you mean this model has no color? I figured that you could just bypass all of that, because even though it says that, you can continue in the menu system and you can just pick which of your already inserted filaments do you want to use. Because when you insert filament into this printer, it first goes from the filament separator down at the bottom, and then you run it up. And then once you get to the filament module and the filament just sticks out a little bit from where this little coupler is, it automatically grabs it and it pulls it all the way here into the print head, and then it retracts and it backs off. At that point, you can go to the menu system on the screen, and then you just tell it what filament you loaded as far as the filament type, and then the color that you are going to use. And that's what the printer is going to assume that you're using when you start future prints. And that has just worked really, really well. All right, so back to the whole this model has no color thing. So even after I go through that and I select, okay, well, you say it has no color, but I say this model is yellow. So use the filament spot that has the yellow filament in it. I will go to print, but something weird would happen in the software where it won't pull that filament that I told it to pull. It would either pull an entirely different filament or it just wouldn't pull anything at all. And then an error will appear on the screen in which it thinks that there may be an obstruction in the filament path or that there may be a tangle, and that you should basically check it out. The way that I found to fix that is to go back to the slicer, and I just gave it a random color, like, okay, fine, let's just say it's red. And I just color the model to be red, and then I send it back to the printer, and then for some reason it now sees that the model has color, and then I'll just tell it to print the color that I actually want, and then it will continue just fine. Now, that is a weird bug, purely software related, and it's something that I hope WonderMaker will get around to fixing. Since I've had this printer, I have not gotten any over-the-air firmware updates. I know that they will send a firmware update. If you have a problem, you tell them about it. They might send you a firmware update, but as far as just a big, wide, everybody gets it firmware update, that is something that has not happened. Now, most of the time I didn't encounter that problem with the "this model has no color" error, but it has happened frequently enough for me to want to tell you about it. But once the print actually gets started, I have had such a high rate of success printing with this printer. Everything has managed to stick to the bed for the most part, with the exception of some very small pieces. Like, for example, this Bart Simpson as Ryu figure that I had printed. He has these parts that are just his fingers. So it's just his 3 fingers and his thumb. And that all had to be printed on the bed. They're very small pieces. And I tried to print them without a brim and they detached from the bed. But once I put a brim on them and tried it again, they printed just fine. But for just about everything else that I've tried to print on this printer, bed adhesion has not been an issue with it at all. And once it's going through the process of printing, I have not noticed any crazy layer shifting or clogs in the extruder or clogs in the nozzle. None of that. It has never happened in this printer in the time that I've been using it. It just hasn't been a thing. At around 200 hours that I put on this printer, everything has just been fine. And when it comes to doing multicolored prints, and I'll try to put up some sample prints that I've done so that you can see, I've never had a poop chute clog. This poop chute is completely exposed because there's nothing on the back, but there's never been anything clogged in there, and it just shoots it out the back without any problems at all. But here is where a problem can and has arisen. This is one of the biggest problems with this particular printer, and it has to do with the spool holders. Now, these are just regular static spool holders, little pieces of plastic that stick out that you just simply put into the side of the printer. They don't move, they don't do anything. And it holds 2 filament reels. The problem with doing 2 on the spool is, even though they have this raised area in the middle that's supposed to separate the 2 spools, depending on the type of spool that you have, it could rub up against the opposite spool, and it could cause that spool to rotate, and that can be a problem. But another problem that this printer has to deal with retraction. When you're doing something like multicolor printing, it'll cut the filament when it's done, and it will retract the filament. But it can retract it so much to the point, especially if you have a more full spool of filament, where the filament will go over the edge of the spool. And when it does that naturally, when it wants to take it again, it will cause a tangle, and that will cause the printer to stop. Now, to its credit, it is able to detect when there is a tangle and when something has gone wrong, and it will pause itself as opposed to continuously trying to print, even though there's like nothing coming out of the nozzle. So I'm glad that it's able to detect that. But this whole filament spool situation with the retraction, it is definitely an issue. It's an issue that I've run into, not a whole lot. I would say maybe 2 to 3 times I've run into that issue, but that is something that they need to fix. And I saw that they were working on it, and there is a solution that is currently available because WonderMaker has put out a file that you can download that basically augments the filament spool situation with parts that you print yourself, and then you have to assemble it. It just makes things a little bit more, I don't want to say like cumbersome, but it is more work that you have to do, work that I think that you should not have to do in order to get something as seemingly simple as making sure that your filament swapping system works properly. I feel like you shouldn't have to print additional parts in order for a standard basic function to, well, work properly, but it is out there. So I guess at least it shows that they're listening and they come up with some kind of solution. But I do know on the versions of the ZR and the ZR Ultra, they have done away with this particular filament system and they've changed it to eliminate that problem without having to print anything extra, at least. That's the impression that they give, and time will tell to see if that actually is a solution all the way around when those printers do come out. But I also know that not everybody wants to do multicolor printing just simply because of how wasteful it can be and how potentially wasteful it can be depending on what you're trying to print. And they would like to just put maybe 4 colors of the exact same color, and then they can just continuously print, and then once one reel runs out, it'll automatically swap over to the next reel that has the same color of the same filament type so that you don't have to manually do that. So I intentionally let a spool of filament run out just to see, well, what would happen. I was down to a last bit of black, and it was kind of unexpected what happened. So the filament was completely taken off the reel, and a good bit of it was still inside the PTFE tube. And that's when the printer just stopped and said, hey, there's no more filament, you need to reload. So I thought that, okay, this is simple enough. I'll just put the new reel on and I'll take the filament, stick it back up through the filament separator. And then once I get to the filament module, it'll know that, hey, there's more filament in here, and then it can keep printing. But every time I did that, it would print for a little bit, just maybe a few seconds. And then it would stop and tell me, hey, there's no filament in here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's filament there. I'm literally looking at it. And I pushed the filament even past the filament module, hoping that it would detect it and just, keep trying to pull it through. But it wouldn't do it. I couldn't figure out any solution to it to just get it to automatically just keep going. So what I ended up having to do, since the printer was paused, I had to basically just tell it, okay, cut the filament. You can go into the menu even when a print is still going on, and you can tell it to unload the filament that it's currently using. And that's what it did. It cut the filament, it retracted what was left, and then I just simply had to take it from the PTFE tube and just pull it out. And it wasn't a lot of filament. It was maybe about this long. And then I just put the new spool of filament into the filament separator through the filament nodule. I told it to load that filament, and it loaded it, continued the print, and then everything went the way that it was supposed to. So there are problems, but they weren't what I would consider to be deal breaker problems, because I've had problems with every 3D printer that I've owned, even Bamboo Lab printers. I even got a video fixing something with that printer that was kind of weird. So, nothing's going to be perfect, and I don't expect it to. So the fact that this is the only thing that I had to deal with was refreshing compared to some other things I've seen from other people who can't seem to get a single print to finish properly without running into an issue. It's like this was blessed from some sort of divine entity, and everything was working as good as you could expect it to be, especially from a first product from a brand new young company with a bunch of young people working for them. But let me show you some prints now, some of the things that I printed on this. Now, so because this is a 300 millimeter cube build volume, this is what I would consider a helmet class 3D printer. So if you're into cosplay and things like that, you can print things that are large enough to fit like the standard size human head. So this right here is a Magneto helmet, and it is textured, and it is also battle damaged, and that's why it looks like it has all these divots and scars in it. It's not because the printer was messing up, it's because that's the way that it's supposed to look. And as I put this on here, see that it fits me as a grown adult, all in one piece right here on this printer. And I haven't done any post-processing on this, so I got to be careful so I don't, hurt myself. But yeah, this all printed without any failures, one go, solid helmet, all one piece, looks really good. And also the default settings for the supports, I think, are pretty good, because the supports were not difficult to remove. I do have to still use my little cutters every now and then on some more tougher bits so I can just rip them off with those instead of having to potentially hurt my thumb and my index finger trying to peel them off. But I've been very pleasantly surprised and happy with how the supports have been coming off, to the point where I didn't feel like I needed to actually change them myself. Another big thing that I printed on this, check out this Proto Man figure here. And as you look at this Proto Man figure, this is him being mostly complete. He's not 100% complete because I did not put the shield on his back, because I want to show you the shield right now. This shield has been, I think, the worst looking print that I've gotten on this printer since I started using it. Now, the shield was printed on its side, and I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it, but you can just kind of see the imperfections in the shield, and it's to the point where I don't want to keep the shield this way. I would rather reprint it so it can be smoother, but this was by far the worst looking thing that I've printed on this printer. But as you just look at the regular model for itself, I think that this looks pretty darn good. And this is many different pieces that had to be assembled together just to get a sense of how well the different tolerances are, so that when you have to put things together, how well will they go together? And I think that they went together very, very good. This Bart Simpson here as Ryu, also multiple pieces, went together just fine. Here's a look at some Hue Forge prints that I have done on this printer. These are multicolored prints. Everything looks absolutely fine with them, very clean. Don't see like a color bleeding from the white to the black. Like I said, it does a good job of cleaning that nozzle before it moves on. And then I also have this big old sword here that is printed in different pieces. I couldn't print this whole thing in one piece, but it's different pieces that are basically attached together and glued together. And I left off the bottom part here is because it's supposed to put like a 1/4-inch wooden dowel in there for like strength and stability. And so I decided not to glue it down because I just wanted to show how this wooden dowel fits into this spot just perfectly without having to force it in or having to do any kind of post-processing. It just goes right in there. And then I just broke it off like a caveman so that I could fit the, I guess the pommel was that part right down into there. Then I can glue that down, and then this sword will be, complete. Very big sword. Really, really like it. And then what's been sitting here on the printer staring at you this whole time is this helmet here that I can't wear. It's not a wearable helmet, but this really did push the multicolor changing, I think, to a very extreme limit, because this is a 3-color multicolor print that took over 3 days to finish, and it changed filaments over 1,300 times, and that resulted in a massive amount of waste. I mean, just look at all of this waste that it produced. I totally would not recommend that you do this because of how incredibly wasteful it is, but I wanted to just do as many ridiculous filament changes in a single print with something that I would actually want to print as I could. And over the course of those 3 days, I had one problem, and it wasn't the printer's fault. One of my reels of black filament had a tangle in it, and it stopped the print. It told me that it had a tangle, and I was able to fix it. I was able to fix that tangle and start the print again, and everything was fine. But you will see this one spot in there where I believe this is where the print stopped and then it started again. So there's that little imperfection right there that just goes around that does not show itself again anywhere else in the helmet. But yeah, that's the only problem that I had. But look at the transition between the black and the red and the white and back to the red, and it's just so clean. This printer did an amazing job on this incredibly wasteful multicolor helmet, and I was very, very happy with how it turned out. And that's just kind of the theme with this WonderMaker ZR for me. It's just been a joy to use. And like I said, I feel like I got lucky, because compared to so many other things that I've seen from other people, it definitely seems like it's not the norm. I do know that the negative comments and bad experiences, people tend to vocalize that more than people who have good experiences, but this just feels different. It just feels like it's not completely normal. But that's why I say check out what other people are saying, check out the other reviews, and just keep an eye on how things are progressing to see if maybe things have turned around or will turn around as far as like the quality control and stuff like that. And one that I definitely recommend is from Elevated Makerspace, who had encountered many a problem with this printer and went pretty in depth in how he managed to solve those issues, and just the whole thing that I think is probably more indicative of what most people have said about their experiences with this printer. But this has been a very good printer. I've been happy with it. Now, as far as whether you should pick up the printer, the price is definitely going to be the biggest concern, because even though they lowered the price down and you can get it for, what was it, like $524 from SaneSmart, the whole thing is right now people are starting to move away from these single nozzle multicolor printers and going towards the tool changing printers, including one from WonderMaker itself. And also on top of that, you have to look at other brands that are already established, like, Bamboo Lab, for example, and how much you could spend on something like a P1S with an AMS, or, something like that. You get that's smaller, but it's from a more established company. You know what you're getting, you know what to look out for. And then the price for that P1S combo is currently $549. So for not even much more money, you can still print in multicolor with a single nozzle, but you just have a lot more security if that's the direction that you wanted to go, as far as the replacement parts, the documentation, the ecosystem, the reliability, everything has been proven, with that printer. So it makes it a harder sell. Even if you did get a printer like mine that just so happens to run just fine and everything seems to be fine with it, when you can spend $20, $25 more and get another brand that's more established and everything just feels more safer and secure as far as, how the printer functions, then it makes it more of a hard sell. So if this price were to go down lower, it would be a lot more attractive, if not for anything else, the build volume that you get. So that's going to do it for now. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Till next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.